What we're doing is instead of going to these customers and saying, look at my shiny new chip, what do you think? We're getting in deep with them at the workshop level in their facilities with their employees and exposing our long-term 5-year roadmap for security.
On this episode of Embedded Insiders, Rich and Erik Wood, Senior Director of Product Security at Infineon Technologies, discuss security at the edge. Diving into the company's wide variety of secure features, Infineon's newest MCU line, the PSoC Edge, is a single solution highlighted for its MCU-ness and effort in making security simpler and cheaper. Next, in our Engineering Heroes segment sponsored by Wind River, we're honoring Nandini Kapaya, a Senior Director of Software Engineering at Google. Kapaya worked alongside her team of 180 and contributed to developing California's earthquake early warning system. The system works to inform millions of Android device users all along the west coast of the US. But first, here's Rich and Ken discussing some of the most recent and significant acquisitions surrounding GaN-based power products.
Hey, friends, engineers, and developers everywhere. Welcome to another episode of Embedded Insiders Podcast. I'm Ken Briota with Embedded Computing Design, and I'm here with Rich Nass, my fearless leader here at Embedded Computing Design. How are you, Rich?
I'm good, but the way you preface that, the engineers and developers are not our friends. You made them mutually exclusive.
Are they our enemies? Are we going to battle? Because I don't like our chances, Rich.
I agree with you. They will definitely outsmart us for sure. Definitely. How you doing?
I'm doing all right. I'm currently up in Greater Boston area, one of my favorite places to be, because I'm going to be meeting with a really interesting company and a bunch of other editors at an editor's day here. But I'm not going to tell you who yet, because you'll have to read about it on embeddedcomputingdesign.com.
Tell me what the area of technology is.
In the energy space, basically, looking at power supply, power management, that kind of thing.
Well, that was actually an unintended segue.
It was, wasn't it?
Speaking of energy, an interesting one crossed my desk the other day where Renesas has completed the acquisition of Transform, one of the, according to the release, a global leader in GaN-based power products. Did you see that?
I did. I'm gonna let global leader pass and just say that not a big surprise to me. I feel like it's a move that makes sense based on what I've been hearing about GaN and the interest in growth there in general.
It is true. However, the part that's a little bit bothersome to me is that there's a bunch of players, some of the bigger players in the industry. When one does something, other people react to it by trying to do the same thing and play catch up. And in this case, I'm referring to the fact that Infineon acquired GaN Systems, which I guess was a really good move. I thought that Infineon was able to do a lot of the GaN things on their own without GaN Systems. But I mean, this really put them in a leadership position. And the reaction from Renesas is to make a similar acquisition.
When was that acquisition with Infineon? I don't remember offhand.
Well, it was announced a while ago, but I believe it was only finalized in the last few months because it takes a while for all the regulatory bodies and all the financial people to come to an agreement on that.
Sure.
But and I think that was a pretty expensive acquisition as well, although I neither know nor care, honestly, what the numbers are, as long as the products are there, and they are.
Yeah.
But it's interesting, but a similar thing has happened in the AI space, where one MCU vendor says, hey, the easiest, quickest way into this space is to make an acquisition. And then it's just like a domino effect where all the competitors say, oh my God, we need to play catch up. And they make similar acquisitions. And the organic way seems to have gone by the wayside.
You know, it's an interesting sort of phenomenon that I know has been written about, umpteen million times for decades, because it's not new. But especially in public companies, they want to keep up with the adjacent companies or competitors, as the case may be. They want to report to shareholders, yeah, we're also in that space, that kind of thing. But I also think that the sort of push me, pull me of develop it in-house or buy it and bring the technology or the development or whatever in from outside is an interesting sort of back and forth struggle. And in the sort of technology engineering, especially embedded and other and connected spaces, I think that there's sort of a micro economy of that when you look at like how startup business models work. This is mostly since the early 2000s, right after the dot-com bubble. A lot of startups in our space, internet space, IoT space, AI space, they're started with the intention of develop a product or a solution and then get acquired. Because
no doubt.
And the bigger companies, Renesas, Infineon, you mean all the way up to the behemoths, Cisco, Microsoft, these guys have absolutely said, yeah, we'll do that. And that's how they pick up a lot of their, sort of new human brain power and resources is through that sort of micro economy of it built. And I'm not trying to make a value judgment on how healthy that is for the business world. I'll leave that to the economists to argue about. But it's an interesting thing that seems to be new. It seems to be newer than starting a company and building it so that you can be at bat with the existing bigger players. That seems to be the less traveled path for startups now.
Yeah, and a lot of that has to do with the economy. In really good times and in really bad times, this happens more frequently. In really bad times, people get laid off, and it's like, oh my God, what do I do? Let me start my own company. And if everything happens according to plan, which is pretty rare, you be successful and you get acquired. Or when times are really good and there's a lot of seed money out there, it's easier to do the startup thing where you have some capital behind you.
Sure.
And then in almost every startup, the plan is to be acquired. It's pretty rare that somebody does a startup to really make it go on their own. As much as they tell you that, and I guess they have to tell you that, but that's not usually the plan.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm not trying to say that in this case we're dealing with a startup. It doesn't look like Transform is really like
right.
They're pretty established, but I think it speaks to the sort of larger M&A discussion that it's, oh man, we need to expand more in the GaN space or the connectivity space. We need more 5G in our products because people are asking for that or whatever. Sometimes the right answer is I have this good partner. Why don't I bring them in? They get a nice payout. I lower my, overhead in the long term on improving my product. And it seems to a lot of the time boil down to the spreadsheet business decision rather than the sort of technological innovation decision.
Well, rather than try to guess what the intentions were, why don't we bring in somebody from Renesas on the next call and ask them, what was your thinking behind this? And, they'll probably have a good answer to it. But when we say, was this completely reactive, see what the response is.
I'm absolutely here for it. And Renesas, consider yourself called out. This is becoming a tradition now for us, Rich. We're calling somebody out on every podcast. So
I'm fine with that. I don't have an issue with that. I mean, that's sort of what we're here for. We're supposed to be calling people out when they make claims. Why do we need security at the edge?
So it's important to really characterize what the edge is in this context, right? So we're talking about an ecosystem, and that ecosystem has devices, 50 billion devices at the edge. It's what we call the IoT or Internet of Things. And then there's all this infrastructure that moves data from that device, which is now connected to data centers that we call the cloud. And security at the edge is about making sure that device, which is out in the wild, is secured. The assets are secured. The keys, the information the personal data from a user. And that device is in the wild, which is a key distinction from the other parts of the ecosystem, like the data center, which is behind four walls and has security cameras and badge access. And getting to the devices physically, let alone logically, is incredibly difficult. Whereas the wristband that's on my hand, I can get to. The thermostat on my wall, I can get to.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, people have been throwing around this term security of things. I assume you're familiar with that term. What does it mean?
Yes. Yeah. So um, security of things is really about what are the assets on these devices that can be compromised. They're areas of interest for an attacker, right? So global regulations are coming about from Europe, Singapore, the United States, where they're saying, okay, there's a societal requirement to protect networks that these devices communicate with, protect personal information from users like you or me, where there may be medical information or something else. Any sort of financial transactions, mitigations of fraud. So those are the security of things that we worry about. And in addition to that, one other thing that we worry about, maybe not global regulations and things like that, but what we worry about also is our customers' intellectual property. And this comes up in greater detail when you talk about artificial intelligence and other sorts of new applications at the edge.
Okay, so let's talk about artificial intelligence. It seems to be the topic that everybody wants to talk about, but I want to go in a little bit of a different direction. Obviously, there's a lot of good things that you can do with artificial intelligence, but is it just as good of a tool for the bad guys?
Yes, it can be. And that's why the devices at the edge and the security of those devices at the edge that are feeding information into the AI is so important. And that's why we are focused so heavily on the applications of machine learning and AI at the edge. So fortunately, I don't need to deal with, in my role, I don't need to worry about artificial intelligence taking over the world. That's something for the Elon Musks to go and consider and worry about. My area of artificial intelligence is again at the edge, right? And it's machine learning models. And I don't think anything that I do or the world I work in is going to cause any sort of Terminator type problems. It's only about in our world the efficiency of these devices. Is the a fan going to be getting louder or quieter, and how can I learn from that? When I step on my brake at a light, is my automobile going to shut down its engine for a little while and save some efficiency, right? So those are applications. If is my wristband going to tell me my sleep apnea is getting worse based on my snoring overnight? Those are machine learning at the edge security type of topics. And we want to make sure that the bad guys can't influence those machine learning models in a negative way with bad information. So we want the sensor data to be efficacious. We want to make sure that those devices aren't hijacked and therefore doing bad things that are not natural and organic to feed the machine learning models. And then most importantly, we want to make sure that attackers can't get their hands on those machine learning models. Your typical IoT device probably has $20,000 worth of developed firmware. Your typical machine learning model has hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of developed firmware on it. So the asset itself of that manufacturer's firmware, the machine learning models themselves, have an intrinsic value that's far higher than anything in a traditional IoT sense. And so that's where our focus is on securing those.
Okay, you had me up until the point where you said, we hope those models don't get in the hands of the hackers. That's not good enough for me. I don't want
Yep.
I don't want to just hope. What What are we doing about that?
So that's where Infineon is leading the way in terms of now of our latest product line having the most advanced microcontroller security on the marketplace. And we spent 2 years developing that specification with ARM. And that's called the PSA Level 4 certification. But what's important about that is we're increasing the baseline of secure hygiene security at the edge in those edge devices. So we protect now at smart card level of security grade level the keys in which things can be encrypted and decrypted and protected. The boot operation for the device itself, which is where most attackers try to take over and compromise a product, is in the boot sequence. They try to sneak in bad code to try to take over the device, and then that code gets authenticated incorrectly through an attack, and boom, they have their device. So that's where we've been focusing, and we have a roadmap that actually extends the value of security, bringing in more sensors, bringing in more efficient cryptography, because now we're dealing with these large models, which can be 3-4 megabytes, and then enhanced security on the interface with the external flash, so that the machine learning models in the external flash can be better protected when bringing into the system.
So is this collaboration with ARM exclusive to Infineon, or is this something that's available to all the vendors?
No. It's available to all the vendors. It's something that ARM collaborated with us. They collaborated with others as well, in a total open way to create the next level. They create a new one every couple of years. The next level of security in the PSA platform security architecture context.
So why should I go with the Infineon offering over competitive offerings?
We're the first to announce support of this standard. So no other devices are on the market that you can sample today that have that certification under study. So it's something that we, again, just led the market with, but we expect more and more of our competitors to be able to support this requirement as well.
Okay. You haven't brought up PSoC Edge, and that's something that I've been hearing about. What is that?
So PSoC Edge is the manifestation of what we've been talking about today, Rich. So it's the newest product line for MCUs at Infineon, and it is the first understudy for the certification PSA Level 4. And what it does is it brings an MCU that's in particularly designed for the IoT and the AIoT, which is the artificial intelligence of things. It's sort of an amalgam that the industry is running with. And what it does is it brings in the performance, what I call the MCU-ness, that's really optimized for machine learning models. So if you think of performance, if you think of power consumption, if you think of memory sizes from internal non-volatile memory, all of those kind of things layered on top of that now is you have this next level of security. It has its own embedded secure enclave, which is a sub-processor with a single access into the system, and it's fully protected from direct access. It's almost a black box to a customer, but it does all the security services and key storage, and encrypt, decrypt, and authenticate, and it's where the chain of trust for the boot sequence emanates from. So it's highly secure.
So all that stuff that you talked about, relative security, how much of that is automated, and how much do I have to do myself? And the parts that I do have to do myself, is that hard?
Well, that's one of the beauties. So ease of use is something that's fundamental, right? So I can build a chip and I can, provide it to a customer with a mountain of documentation and a technical resource manual and say, go have fun. Or like what we do is we have our own build system and resource manager platform, where we provide an entire security stack based on open source implementations and ports to our device itself, which are ready to go and compile for customers. So if you want a bootloader, if you want the full TFM trusted firmware -M security stack that does the attestation, firmware updates, TLS operations, secure storage for keys. All that software is available to compile out of the box for our customers, sitting in the Modus Toolbox build system.
So last question. A lot of this stuff has been available for some time, and the engineering community, for whatever reason, is not taking full advantage. Why is that? And how do we get them to change the mindset?
That's a great question, Rich. So I think some seminal events just have taken place, right? So there's a convergence of three things. One is suppliers like us are providing better security, making it simpler, less impactful from performance, and lower cost. So that's key point number one, is we're making it easier, right? Easier, simpler, cheaper. Number two is the consumer is getting more aware now. People like yourselves and stories, in the media, it's getting much more press and consumption of the ideas from the consumer itself. And then three, the governments, the regulators, are putting out now new regulations that require end product makers to conform to certain security outcomes. So it's not just security requirements, but outcomes, right? And to fail in some of those outcomes, there's 15 million euro type of penalties, right? And you have to pull everything off the shelf. So the business continuity is a massive impact. So there's the fines, but also the business continuity. So those three things coming together, we are seeing a significant hockey stick increase in terms of adoption of security. I can't name them, but if you look at the customers that you would say the Magnificent Seven, as Wall Street calls them, they're now one by one implementing a new way to approach chip procurement. They no longer look at the MCU-ness of the device and then figure out if it's secure enough, right? They have a team of hardware security engineers who first evaluate if the chip meets their security requirements before they ever evaluate it for its MCU-ness and appropriateness for a socket, right? So that's a huge paradigm shift that just started taking place this year. And therefore, in my day in and day out with my team, what we're doing is, instead of going to these customers and saying, look at my shiny new chip, what do you think? We're getting in deep with them at the workshop level in their facilities with their employees and exposing our long-term 5-year roadmap for security. What sensors are coming when? What is our cryptography like? How are our tools being developed? What are our interfaces? At the roadmap level, before we're even talking about silicon intercept and before we're even talking about an eval board or something like that, right? So we're getting in deep on the requirements level with the Magnificent Seven.
That was Erik Wood. He's a Senior Director of Product Security at Infineon.
My name is Nandini Kappaya. I work in Android as part of Google. I'm an engineering director in Android. And among other things, I work on Android location, which is getting your location, your blue dot on Google Maps right. Android authentication, which is making sure you can log in and set up seamlessly and smoothly. And personal safety, which is to make sure that your devices work for you when it's of most need to you, when you're in an emergency or when you need to call 911 or there is some kind of natural disaster or some situation when you might need your phone to help you. I grew up in Bangalore, India. I lived there for the first 22 years of my life, and then I moved to the United States for graduate school, and then I got a job here. My childhood was, I would say, a typical one that's typical for an Indian child growing up in Bangalore. I went to an all-girls school, so that was a somewhat different experience than others, I'd say. My parents were pretty traditional and pretty strict about things like, doing well in school and getting that perfect grade and so on. And I rebelled a little in my teen years over that philosophy. But for the most part, I did some activities and focused a lot on schooling. That was what my childhood was like. I find that I do my best work and my team does their best work when they understand the why behind it, when there's a clear purpose, when there's clear goals, and they are really motivated by the purpose of it. My average day has a big component of taking care of my children and going to work. So I get to work at around 8:39, and I usually have a large set of meetings in the morning. I work with teams in Europe very often, and those are the best time zones for them. So my mornings generally contain either group meetings or one-on-ones, and then I have lunch at the wonderful cafeteria at Google, and then my afternoons have some meetings, and sometimes a bunch of it is in deeper work that I sort of do on my own. In the evenings, I go home for dinner, in time for dinner at around 5 o'clock, and then we spend some family time. We have dinner. We probably help my kids with a little bit of homework or pick them up from activities, and they go to bed at 8. And then my husband and I watch TV, and I then finish up the work that I didn't quite finish up at work. I finish that up, wrap that up, and go to bed. That's my typical day. But the pandemic, I think, changed a lot of things about working remotely and having much better tools and much more comfort around, video conferencing and so on. What I love about working with teams in Europe, other than visiting all of those awesome places, is that they bring a perspective that's different from ours, and that really helps make our products better, and for me to also understand those perspectives as we design and build for people. My favorite part of my job, I would say, is working with people. We have a lot of amazing people at Google, at Android. My team is awesome. I'm often in awe of how deep their knowledge goes in some areas, like how much they know about how GPS works, or how much they've thought about earthquake early warning. And I feel that really lifts me up in terms of how I look at my work, how I understand it, and really understanding the domain in addition to the computer science part of it is I think the best part of my day. I like working with passionate folks, and I find that they come with ideas and creativity. Maybe it doesn't all fit perfectly right away, but I think that's part of my job, to take those ideas, that imagination, that push for excellence, and try to deliver and work with others to deliver a great product on Android. So a lot of folks on my team have deep domain expertise in their fields. And we take that, and we take the ideas and the innovation that our maybe product managers come up with, and we have to put that together to build a great experience. An example of that is earthquake early warning. So we have we are trying to warn people when an earthquake happens so that they can take shelter and do the thing that makes them safe. So we take all this knowledge of seismology and what we can do on a phone. How can we deliver a warning most effectively, most usefully? We put that together, and when an earthquake happens, you have seconds to react. So the warning better be timely, and the experience has to be great, so people understand when they get the warning, they have a few minutes to react. So bringing all that together and scaling it worldwide, globally, that's the kind of thing that we have to do. Earthquake early warning works differently in different parts of the world. There are some places like California where we have seismometers that are buried in the ground. And this is done, this is what we think of as shake alert here in California. And when there is an earthquake, these seismometers pick up the shaking, and they send an alert, which we then take that alert and broadcast it to all the Android phones in that specific area. In other parts of the world, there are no seismometers because having a seismometer network is an expensive, difficult, elaborate affair, and not all regions of the world are really able to afford that or have the expertise for it. In those places, for example, in the Philippines, Androids in those areas work as tiny seismometers. They pick up the shaking and collect that information and send it up to our earthquake early warning servers. And from that, we're able to tell how whether an earthquake is coming, how big is that going to be, what is the magnitude, what is the area of folks that will be affected, and we send an alert back down to the phones. We're not detecting earthquakes, we're in fact racing them. Phones closer to the epicenter see the shaking first, and we're able to tell how that's going to spread out and send a warning to the other folks who might be in the area that the earthquake would affect. USGS estimates that about 800,000 people have been killed by earthquakes in the last 20 years. And studies show that if people got an early warning, that would reduce earthquake injuries by half. And when we look at that, we see that there is an opportunity for Android and folks' devices to help them when they live in a seismically active area, and earthquake early warning can be helpful for them. A few seconds of warning reduces earthquake injuries by 50%. I think my life is quite different from, what I had imagined, but, in the last 20 years, tech and what we can do with tech has grown immensely, and it's been really exciting to be part of that journey and be in an industry that's constantly innovating. And I think I'm really lucky to have been part of it during this time, where I can participate in its innovation, in its value that it's bringing to people around the world, and that's been really cool. I think it's important for folks to have a strong foundation have a strong foundation in computer science to really know, how to be a great engineer. And I think another part is also to be innovative and creative and see how can I take my skills and apply them really meaningfully to the problem that I'm solving. The most successful people that I've seen are folks who have a deep understanding of a domain, whether that's seismology or GPS or sensors, and they're able to take the mastery they have over that domain and connect it to the problem that needs solving, and are able to do that really elegantly. I think a combination of your technical skills, your education in computer science or engineering, combined with domain expertise, that you're able to kind of bring that together to solve a meaningful problem for our users, is what makes for a really successful career.
I'm a director of product management, and been at Google for about 6.5 years, and really, I would say have worked with Nandini in some capacity for that whole time, and more, I think, as the years have gone by and later in my career have worked even more closely with her. So it's only our relationship has, I think, only gotten closer or better. And more of our worlds have overlapped over time. She runs the whole engineering organization for part of Android, and for most of her team, I run kind of the product function for the same products. Yeah, we work really closely together on kind of overall prioritization for the teams on, what are the things we're keeping an eye on, some of the things that are more risky or things that we think need a little bit more guidance. We talk about processes, how to keep our teams on track, what kind of reviews we should have. We talk about the investments the team's making. So, should we invest a little bit more in this area? Should we explore this area a little bit more? And the health of the team, the organizational structure, making sure that there's, a team that has the appropriate amount of PM support, that the teams are kind of right-sized for the amount of investment we want to make. She's the first person that I'll bounce ideas off if I'm having, some problem or I can't get through something or don't understand something. Like, she's the first person I'll probably ping and be like, hey, can we talk about this? Like, what about this? Have you thought about, how do I think about this, or have you seen this before? And she's a great person to kind of help me work through some of that kind of stuff. And so I know we did a lot of testing on that, which is hard. It's hard to do earthquake testing because you don't have any control over when it's going to happen. And so certainly when earthquakes happen, it was both like, okay, how serious is it? It can affect a lot of lives, but it's also like, okay, there's more data for us to understand how our systems work. So I think it took actually quite a long time to test, because we're kind of at the mercy of the earth and like how many earthquakes actually happen and how much data can we actually get to make sure the system's working well. The staged approach was helpful. Like how do you launch something like this in a way that reduces the risk, that ensures that we're successful with each step? It's something that never existed before. Hard to tell what expectations we'd be setting. And so outside of just like, is the technology going to work or not, which I think is almost 100% the engineering team figuring that out. I think the next most challenging thing is probably the go-to-market plan. How do you do this in a way that's going to be successful? The only other thing I'll add is that I consider her as well a very good friend. I've worked with her for, like I said, over 6 years. Even outside of work, I would hang out with her and I would be her friend, and we there's good times and there's hard times at work, and she's always there for both. I will celebrate with her and I will complain to her and I hope she considers me the same, but she's also just a great person to work with. But I think even at work, I think representation matters. Having someone, even for me, to have someone that I see at a VP level or higher, that are women, that are people that I feel like are people that I can relate to, that I can see myself becoming. And I would think for Nandini, the same would be true. I think for people that aspire to be like Nandini, I think being able to see her in that role, be successful in that role, is really important.
Thanks for listening to this edition of Embedded Insiders. For more daily news, videos, and podcasts, visit our website at embeddedcomputing.com.